Yeah, you lose your name, your family will never know, you lose all your friends, you have nobody. And if you are arrested, we don't know you.
And then all sorts of people started in the neighborhood asking about me, my family, everybody, security clearance.
It was worth every minute of it, I think, and I hope that people realize how important the women were in the OSS effort. He got to talking, and he found out that I had been studying Japanese and that I was a newspaper woman. And he said, well, would you like to work for the government? And I said, well, yeah, but on one condition, that I want to go overseas, because that's where I think all the action is. And he said, I think I can guarantee that. And I said, well, then what would I do? And he said, I can't tell you until you sign up with us. And then that's how I got in. I was curious, but I did want to see some action. That was what happened to me.
There was a sizable number of Czechs and Slovaks working as labor for the Germans. So we hit them with a leaflet called inviting them to cross the lines. And for that, 600 guys that crossed the lines and deprived the German army of labor, I got my Bronze Star.
I mean, London was not a walk in the park. We had the V1s, V2s from 40s, and a few Dorniers, Junkers, and I mean, there was the London docks were known as Buzz Bomb Alley, and it really wasn't fun. But I mean, we were all fatalists, and if your name's on it, so be it. If you survive, well, lucky you. The story was, if you heard a V2, chances are you'd survive. If you didn't, it didn't matter anyway, because you'd be gone. The V1s were nasty. They really were. Very nasty. You all didn't have those, did you? No. But the King and Queen would always go, the flag, the royal standard always flew on Buckingham Palace. They'd never left London, and they would go down to where the worst bombing had been in person. And oh, what a morale builder. And so would Churchill. Believe you me, the war plans, I think I'm right in saying the German war plans are America was next. The U-boats were all ready, and if that had happened, you'd all be speaking German on one coast and Japanese on the other, probably.
In direct violation of the Treaty of Versailles, Germany spent the 1930s rebuilding their military into a massive fighting force that Hitler planned to use in his conquest of Europe. In response, the French government poured their resources into the Maginot Line, a massive self-contained fortification that ran the entire length of their eastern border. Unfortunately, the Maginot Line turned out to be one of the greatest miscalculations of modern military history. Germany's Luftwaffe simply flew over it. France's formal surrender was finalized in just a matter of weeks. Tanks were a cornerstone of the Nazi blitzkrieg attack strategy. Though armored fighting vehicles were developed on all sides, it was General Heinz Guderian of the German army whose groundbreaking strategies and tactics led to the creation of the dreaded panzer divisions he later commanded. Other generals, such as Rommel, used the destructive power of these multi-ton armor-plated Goliaths to put Germany far ahead of the Allies in the early days of the war. By 1940, the combined armed forces of Nazi Germany were unlike anything the modern world had ever seen. After their brutal success in Poland, the Wehrmacht prepared to unleash their lightning war against the West. It was over quickly. Here is the band of criminals that was the Axis leadership at the beginning of the war. Adolf Hitler, Führer of the Third Reich, the man who personifies true evil. Benito Mussolini, an incompetent thug who sold out his own people. Hermann Göring, the decadent Reich Marshal in charge of the Luftwaffe. And Heinrich Himmler, head of the Nazi SS who oversaw the greatest crimes against humanity. Himmler was a mentally unstable man who truly believed the crazy mythology that he and his fellow SS deviants created in their efforts to establish an independent state within Nazi Germany. Unfortunately, Himmler took his own life before he could be brought to trial, unlike Göring, who was convicted and sentenced to death at the Nuremberg War Crimes Tribunal, and who is no doubt spending eternity with the rest of his friends. The European air war that started with the RAF in the Battle of Britain was continued by the forces of the Army Air Corps. Nimble fighters piloted by brave young men roamed the countryside, attacking any target of opportunity, disrupting the German war machine on the ground and in the air, while heavy American bombers made daring daylight raids against the Third Reich. But there was a heavy price to be paid. By war's end, almost 1 out of every 10 Americans killed had been a member of the 8th Air Force. The ability to precisely hit a long-range target with an explosive warhead was only a theory when the war started. The Allies experimented with radio-controlled drones, while the Japanese used human kamikazes to inflict damage in the Pacific. At their Peenemünde research lab, however, German scientists developed the V1 flying bomb. Almost 30 feet long and powered by a pulse jet engine, thousands of these vengeance weapons were launched from sites all over Western Europe, inflicting heavy damage. After the war, captured V1s were used by the United States to leapfrog into a new realm of guided missile development. Though progress would still have the occasional setback. Fighting was fierce as Allied troops battled house to house and town to town in the days following the invasion. Despite heavy casualties, the Allies soon had the upper hand. The Nazi war effort was beginning to collapse. This news swept Paris, where the city erupted as everyday citizens joined with the resistance in rising up against their Nazi occupier. Fear and anguish turned to joy and elation as the last German forces evacuated and the first Allied tanks appeared. What had seemed impossible to even dare think in the darkest days of the Blitzkrieg had unbelievably come true.
Bonsoir Manon. I'm